Extinction. What exactly is it? You might think that the answer is simple, but in reality, the idea of extinction is a great topic. On the surface, it seems so straightforward. A species was alive and thriving at one point, and now it isn't anymore. Ergo, that species is classified as extinct. That is the basic idea of extinction. However, it's a bit more complicated than that. Let's look at the dinosaurs, for example. Probably the most famous type of animal to ever go extinct in world history. But are they truly extinct? Well, yes and no. All non-avian dinosaurs did in fact go extinct during the KPG extinction event around 65 million years ago. But what about birds? Modern science now knows that birds aren't just related to dinosaurs, but in fact are avian dinosaurs that have persisted into modern times. So are dinosaurs truly extinct then? Well, to get the answer, let's first define the word extinct. Merriam-Webster defines the word extinct in pertinence to animals as no longer existing. Therefore, the answer to the question of if dinosaurs are extinct has to be no. In truth, that definition seems a little weak to me. Take trilobites, for example. Trilobites are not alive anymore, and since they all died out, they don't exist anymore, and thus are extinct by Merriam-Webster's definition, right? Well, no. The argument could be made that trilobites do still exist, just not in a live form. They exist in fossils, hundreds of thousands of fossils all around the world. Therefore, they exist, and are not extinct by Merriam-Webster's definition. So for the purpose of this video, I propose we come up with a new, better definition that narrows down what extinct should mean. So how about this? Extinct. An individual or species of animal that was or were alive at any point in time that no longer exists in a living form. Okay, now I know that this definition still doesn't technically solve the problem we had with dinosaurs and birds earlier, but you get the idea. So according to this new definition, trilobites are extinct since they no longer exist in a living form. But how do we know that trilobites are no longer living among us and we've just never seen any? Or any other animal classified as extinct for that matter? Thylacines, dodo birds, cave lions? What if they're all still living?
How do we know exactly? What about coelacanths? They were thought to be extinct, but now we know they aren't. Gets the old noggin jogging, doesn't it? Keep an open mind.
Alright, just settle down, buddy. Take that tinfoil hat off your head and let me learn you something. Believe it or not, scientists do have a set of methods for determining if an animal is extinct. First and foremost is observation. Take a look around you. Seen any T-Rexes running around your neighborhood lately? No? Okay, glad we got that sorted out. The idea of observation states that if the animal has not been seen in the wild for some time, or has not been observed alive, then it is relatively safe to assume that the animal is extinct, or at least functionally extinct, but we'll get to that later. The second method is to examine the fossil record. If an animal appears in the fossil record up until a certain point in geologic time, then all of a sudden stops appearing, it is relatively safe to assume that the animal died out around the time it stops appearing in the fossil record and is now extinct. Take trilobites, for example. Again, if you couldn't tell, we like trilobites here. These little dudes were just everywhere in the fossil record, from the Cambrian period all the way up to the end of the Permian. That's a time span of more than 200 million years. Then, at the end of the Permian, they disappear from the fossil record entirely, which means that no trilobite fossils have been found in any rock newer than just about 280 million years old. Therefore, it's safe to assume their total extinction at the end of the Permian period.
But what about the coelacanth? According to the fossil record, it should be extinct.
Well, you're right. According to the fossil record, the coelacanth should be extinct. That's because the fossil record is incomplete. In fact, it is believed that the fossil record only records about 5% of all life that existed on Earth. So the fossil record can be inaccurate, but it still serves as a baseline for scientists to start determining if a species is extinct. Now, the fossil record might be well and good for animals like trilobites, T-Rex, and mosasaurs, but what about modern-day species that don't appear in the fossil record? For that, scientists mainly rely on observation. Observation has two forms: direct and indirect observation. Direct observation is exactly what it sounds like. It's when a person directly observes the animal in a living form in its habitat. For example, going on a safari in Africa and seeing elephants. That is direct observation. You can see the elephants, they're alive and well, they're right there, it's in its habitat, therefore, elephants are not extinct. But what about species that are elusive or that have a small population? In those cases, indirect observation might be required to determine if that species is still alive. Indirect observation is a bit like tracking an animal while hunting. Scientists look for signs of the animal instead of the animal itself. They look for things like scat, tracks, nesting sites, burrows, dens, bodies, remains, kill sites, and just a whole slew of other signs to find out if the species they're observing is still living in that habitat. If these signs can be found and are relatively fresh, then it's safe to assume that the animal is still alive. Scientists also use other, more unorthodox methods for indirect observation, like speaking to local people to determine the locations of animals, and even living in a habitat for a period of time to watch and observe as many different species as they can. But scientists can't possibly know everything, right? They haven't been everywhere, they haven't seen every single animal in existence, they can't possibly know if species like the thylacine and dodo birds are truly extinct, right? Well, actually they can, thanks to a new groundbreaking technology called environmental DNA. With this new technology, scientists don't have to go everywhere and observe everything, they just need a sample. Using environmental DNA, scientists can take a sample of soil or water from a habitat and determine what species live there by analyzing micro traces of DNA that are left over from animals in that environment. Think about a wolf taking a drink of water from a stream. As it laps up the water, some of its saliva gets washed off its tongue and into the stream. That saliva contains the wolf's DNA, and the environmental DNA technology can pick up those tiny traces of wolf DNA from a sample of that stream's water. That's bad news for you cryptid lovers out there. It means that species can no longer effectively hide, even in vast habitats where direct or even indirect observation might not be practicable. Now, of course, this new technology still has its flaws, but give it enough time and it's going to be a great tool for determining the extinct status of a species. Now, you heard me mention another term earlier in the video, functionally extinct. What is functional extinction? Well, in short, functional extinction occurs when a species has a population that is too small to maintain and sustain itself. That is to say, there's not enough genetic diversity left among the population to adapt with its environment, or to different pressures. In a scenario like this, the species no longer has a large effect on its habitat, and no longer fulfills its environmental role. In this scenario, it is also technically possible that the species could make a comeback, but it is unlikely to occur without human intervention. That is because of the aforementioned environmental pressures on the species. First is predation. If a species only has 4 or 5 members left, and a predator picks off 1 or 2, it narrows the chance of survival for the entire species by almost 25%. Alternatively, that predator might also have picked off the last remaining male in the species, which further exacerbates the species situation. Second is disease. If a species is highly susceptible to a disease, and no member of that species has an advantage to help it survive because the gene pool is so small, then that disease could wipe out the entire remaining population. Or imagine if the habitat suddenly changed. It was too hot or too cold, too wet, too dry for that species to effectively survive. Normally, the individuals with adaptations that would be advantageous in this scenario would survive, and the species would continue to adapt and evolve. But if there are no individuals with any mutations due to the lack of gene diversity, then a shift in climate like this could wipe out the species. Third, the species might have a long gestation period. Gestation refers to the length of a pregnancy. If a species has a long gestation period and a low birth rate, like elephants, then it's possible that the species could die off from that low birth rate. In other words, the deaths start to outpace the births, and eventually the last individual just dies off. The fourth and last pressure that I'll discuss, because honestly I could go on and on, is going to be the male to female ratio in a species. If there's a major imbalance in the male to female ratio in a species, it can make it very difficult for that species to breed effectively. For example, imagine if there are only 10 lions left in the world, and one of them is female. Once she becomes pregnant from one of the males, that's it. The other males don't get to breed until after her pregnancy. Or alternatively, if there's only one male and 9 females, the male can, in theory, breed with each female to produce as many offspring as possible. However, this is unlikely to occur, and this action lowers the genetic diversity of the species, and thus lowers the population's chance of survival. Sadly enough, functional extinction has occurred in our lifetime, and very recently to boot. In 2020, the northern white rhinoceros was declared functionally extinct. And as of 2023, there are only 2 northern white rhinoceroses left in the world, both of which are female. But there is a ray of hope for species around the world that are in danger. Scientists all over the world have started DNA libraries by taking samples from captive and wild animals. Vast amounts of animal DNA is being collected, stored, and preserved every single day. This is being done in the hopes that one day, in the future, these species can make a triumphant and full return.